I think one of the important and hopeful signs of this moment in time is that there's a desire not just to know about the divine, but to know the divine, to experience it, and not just in terms of religious belief, but in terms of experience, and to experiencing it in and through relationship, in and through relationship with one another, but also in and through relationship with earth.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the School for Good Living podcast. Today, my guest is John Philip Newell, author of The Great Search, Turning to Earth and Soul in the Quest for Healing and Home. John Philip is someone that I wanted to interview. This is the second time, but I wanted to have him back on the show because I think that John Philip is a very expansive thinker. He's a deep thinker. He has a great background in Celtic wisdom, in Christianity, but also in just wisdom, in ways of living that make a difference in the quality of our lives. In this show, we talk about religious exile, the search for meaning and healing, the importance of love and connection with the earth, gratitude as a spiritual practice. We also explore something called the efficacy of desire. We talk about the dynamic of saying yes and no in love, finding meaning in suffering, and the role that prayer can play in our lives. This conversation also covers some of John Philip's personal journey, including his decision to relinquish his ordination from the Church of Scotland to explore a broader spiritual path that is more aligned and inclusive with his evolving vision. This is a conversation that I hope you enjoy, you take something away from that will improve the quality of your life, it will deepen your moment-to-moment experience, it will expand your vision, that will open your heart. I do think that John Philip Newell's vision for a new emerging spirituality rooted in love for the earth and the human soul is a beautiful one that is available to each of us if only we have ears to hear. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with my friend, John Philip Newell. So let's begin by talking about The Great Search. I want to ask you, why did you call it The Great Search? Why this title?
Titles are always a pretty interesting, often wrestling match with with one's editor and publisher. And but one of the reasons why, in the end, we went with this title is that I have for many years now been aware of a type of religious exile for so many in the Western world, hundreds of thousands, I suppose millions of our brothers and sisters who began within the four walls of a religious tradition are no longer there. And why is that? And I've been trying to pay attention to, well, what are we yearning for? What are we looking for? And that was where the sense of we are in a time of enormous transition in the Western world, certainly religiously, but I think politically and ecologically, we're in a transition as something new is trying to be born, a new vision of reality, a new way of interrelating and seeing one another and relating to all things. So instead of seeing the diaspora or the exile in negative terms, in term, we might have called it the great falling away or the great exile or the great diaspora. I preferred to focus positively on what are the yearnings, what are we longing for at this moment in time. So each chapter in the book is really looking at an aspect of the spiritual longings or yearnings of this moment in time. And I think they're particularly pronounced in those of us who are in a type of exile from our religious inheritance. But I think many of the yearnings are also to the fore in those who are remaining to try to be involved within their religious inheritance and traditions. looking for more than what has been on offer. So that, the first chapter is seeking vision, for instance, wanting um, to to enter a vision of the sacred that is way beyond the bounds that we've tried to set around sacredness. And chapter 2, seeking earth. I think this moment is characterized by a desire for a spirituality of intimacy with earth rather than alienation from earth. Chapter 3, seeking presence, seeking to know the divine, not just through concepts, but through encounter, through awareness of the deepest energies of one's own being, and so on throughout the book. So that was how we came to call it The Great Search. And I think the subtitle is quite indicative of where the book goes, and that is turning to earth and soul in the search for healing and home. So that I think what most profoundly connects all of the great teachers that I draw from in the book is this love of earth and love of the true depths of the human soul, and knowing that by coming back into true relationship with earth and the true depths of the human soul, that is where we will find healing and we'll find a new sense of home address spiritually.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down. I was really intrigued by that term, religious exile. And in the book, you talk about those who are in religious exile being maybe of two sorts: those who've formally left the religion of their upbringing or their past, and those who have stayed but are not really involved in it. They haven't formally left, but they're maybe disaffected or uninvolved. And of course, there's a lot of reasons to stay in a religion for the community, the connection it does provide, the fact that it's been a part of our history for whatever reason. But that was a term that I had not been familiar with, is religious exile, but it was one that resonated with me. And as we can see from research, people who will identify themselves as spiritual but not religious, that number seems to grow year over year. And I do think it's pretty easy to see that we're looking for something more. And to me, the place that shows up pretty boldly is in our society's seeming new or rediscovered openness to psychedelics, where we're going, okay, all these traditions that we've had are not working anymore. Maybe I can find it in a plant or a chemical. So I think this book is very perfect for this moment in those who are searching.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the use of psychedelics it can be seen as very consistent with a spiritual search to experience the sacred, rather than to simply hold certain propositional beliefs and doctrinal credences about the divine. So I think one of the important and hopeful signs of this moment in time is that there's a desire not just to know about the divine, but to know the divine, to experience it, and not just in terms of religious belief, but in terms of experience, and to experiencing it in and through relationship, in and through relationship with one another, but also in and through relationship with earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I'd love to know is so you've talked a little bit about the first three chapters, how you structured them, and you pointed out that the subtitle, Turning to Earth and Soul in the Quest for Healing and Home. I want to ask you, if you will, to describe more fully the structure of the book. But before we go there, will you talk a little bit more about those two words in the subtitle, healing and home? Why are those two things that are important to have as the context of this conversation?
Mm. The healing emphasis, first of all, yeah, we're in such a profound state of brokenness in humanity's relationship with Earth, uh, to the point that now the future of humanity is in question, uh, uh, given the unsustainability of our relationship with Earth. And uh, uh, so healing in our relationship with Earth, but also we're so sort of broken in our interrelationships within and between nations. When you think of the horror and tragedy of war and violence that is escalating in different parts of the world, think of the violence even within our nations and the brokenness of our communities, the brokenness of families. So healing is an important word on that front. I think it points to a mark of this moment in time as being our brokenness of relationship with one another and with the life forms of Earth. Home, I think the reason that appears in the subtitle and very much throughout the book is that home, of course, can be a physical place, but I think at a deeper level, it's a spiritual place deep within us. Where do we feel rooted? Where do we feel grounded? Where do we find our deepest sense of identity and essence? So the book is trying to address that sort of restlessness in the human soul and realizing that we are searching for a new rootedness of identity within the spiritual depths of our being and in our relationship with Earth as both a physical and a spiritual reality.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Something that makes me think of, just as a personal aside. I was years ago at an event, a personal growth, like self-improvement event, hosted by Tony Robbins. And I don't know if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins event live, but I think he's pretty masterful in both his showmanship, but his facilitation, where he's able to work with one individual in a room of thousands and then lead them through whatever they're dealing with in a way that gets to the heart of it, and then help them reframe it or create a new, let go of a belief or embrace a new belief or whatever. And it was a really touching story where two brothers were there, and one had been in prison and had, I think, this, need of healing, like we were talking about, and in fact had expressed a desire to end his life. And his brother had brought him to Tony Robbins, not knowing what else to do. And so here he is having this intervention with Tony. And Tony, I don't even remember the whole thing other than that kind of context. But then as Tony worked with him, I remember Tony said, "Make this your home." The guy had talked about, I don't belong anywhere, and prison, was the result of that, and like all this. And when Tony was saying, make this Earth, make this community your home. And it was just such a powerful thing. That was years ago, and I probably think about that at least once a week, what home even means and how to be home and not always searching or restless. Although there's something in us, I think, that is searching.
Yeah.
It's a powerful concept, home.
Mm. Yeah. And, many of our religious traditions have identified external places as home or the center, like Rome or Mecca or Jerusalem, these places outwardly that have been revered within our religious traditions. And that's fine, I think, to cherish certain places outwardly. But one of the points I make in the book is that we are increasingly aware of living in an omnicentric universe. The center is everywhere. and that's true spiritually as well. And I think that these places that we outwardly revere, like Rome and Mecca and Jerusalem and so on, they I think are primarily to serve our true center, our true sense of home, and that is deep within us. So they are a value and blessing for humanity. I think only to the extent that they really um, enable us to be deeply at home within our souls and deeply at home in a true relationship with Earth.
Yeah, no doubt. Will you talk a bit about how you structured the book and why you, and as you do, if you'll talk about why and how did you choose the teachers you did to
Yeah.
fill that structure?
Mm. Um, these 9 teachers have been important to me over the years, and as I began to reflect more intentionally on this time of religious exile, or this sense of so many people being in a type of spiritual diaspora, and disenchanted with much of what was happening within the 4 walls of their religious inheritance, I began more intentionally to identify what teachers I felt did deeply address the yearnings and the search that's going on at this moment in time, and um, and uh, there are of course other teachers that I could have drawn from as well, but I sort of followed the instinct of my own spirit, knowing that, well, these teachers have really fed me, and realizing, well, if they've fed me, maybe I can transmit their wisdom and to distill some of their wisdom for this moment in time. Um, a number of years ago on Iona, at the end of one of our retreats, we often invite people at the end of a 1 week pilgrimage experience on Iona to speak one word as an expression of gratitude. And I remember one of the gentlemen present. He was a Buddhist, and he was there with his wife, who was Christian. And the word that he spoke was transmission. And of course, the word transmission is very important in Buddhist sensibility and spirituality, because they see the teacher not as necessarily an original fount of wisdom, but the teacher is someone who transmits the great wisdom of those who have gone before us, but transmits it in a way that tries to distill it and tries to utter it in new ways for the present moment. And when he used the word transmission, I thought, yeah, that is what I love to be, and that is what I think I can do. Not to inflate my abilities, but I think one of the gifts I've been given is the ability to distill wisdom and to try to transmit it to today. So there was this feeling of these 9 teachers have blessed me in my journey, and the sort of formulation of the vision of the book came very much in relation to my own journey. It's not a book about me, but I think it's a book that reflects some of what my journey has been. So a couple of years ago, I relinquished my ordination as a Christian minister, and someone gave me a better word for it recently when they said, "Well, you've given back your ordination," and I think that's a better way to put it, because it no longer felt like it fitted. So it was important for me to give back my ordination um, because the way so much Western Christianity, and in my case, the Church of Scotland, has been rooted in its beliefs in the sort of creedal formulations of the 4th century, that very complicated time when Christianity got into bed with empire. And I think we need to ask all sorts of questions about what was happening in the 4th century. In terms of what was convenient to empire, and religion was often used to sanction what empire wanted to do. And I mean, I'm not just speaking about the Roman Empire, I'm speaking about how empire has used religion over the centuries, whether that is the British Empire or the American Empire or any nation that has often set itself up over against the rest of the world and has been sort of willing to exploit and use other nations for its own purposes. And religion again and again has been wheeled in to sanction the wars of empire or the exploitation of empire. So a couple of years ago, I realized there was a profound disconnect between what I'm trying to teach, what I'm trying to write, and the formal beliefs and doctrines of Western Christianity. So it was really important for me to relinquish my ordination and uh, and uh, and try much more intentionally to simply speak from within the human soul today, and to access great teachers who I think are feeding the human soul. So the 9 teachers that I draw from, I mean, in their own day and in their own time, these were often figures that were considered heretical or way out on the edge of their tradition. And here they are, and now actually speaking right into, I think, what is very much at the heart of the quest of the human soul today. So that was how I sort of went about choosing them. I had been blessed by them, and I felt that that by distilling them, by transmitting them, I could offer blessing to others who feel in exile or who are searching for more than what their traditions have been offering them.
Yeah, thank you. How do you intend, or how do you hope, or how do you suggest readers use the book? And I ask because I find myself as I think I'm probably in your target audience, so to speak. I think I'm the kind of person you wrote the book for. And it was part of what was fun for me was that this was a mixture of people that whose work I was familiar with and some that I had never heard of. And whether it was to go deeper with people that I already, like Rumi, that I already enjoyed and appreciated, probably haven't spent as much time with as you, or others like Nan Shepherd that I'd never heard of, but deeply resonated with. And then I enjoyed just reading it, but of course I read it to prepare for a conversation with you to share with others. So even though I'm in that target audience, so to speak, probably, I wonder, how do you hope or suggest readers work with or engage with what you've written?
Mm. Yeah, I think the book sets out to certainly address our conscious search for where healing and a sense of home spiritually is to be found. And the other thing I try to do in the book, because at the end of each chapter, I include a sort of meditative awareness exercise or discipline by offering some words that are offered in a more sort of contemplative and meditative practice way. And I think that will allow the book to address the heart as well as the head. I think at this sort of moment in time, this time of exile or diaspora, it's very much the case that we don't quite know where the journey is taking us, and So I think that it's okay to not know exactly, where we're going to land or what it's going to look like in another 25 years. So I think it's a matter of sort of trusting some of the deepest yearnings of our being. And it's those yearnings that I've been trying to pay attention to and then drawing on teachers to address the yearnings. Um, uh, I think I mentioned early in the book a saying from Simone Weil, the young Jewish philosopher, writer, who managed to escape Paris just before the Nazi occupation of her homeland in the Second World War, but then tragically died before the end of the war. But she uses a phrase that has been really important to me over the years, and I think it's very central to this book. She speaks of the efficacy of desire, and by that she means that getting in touch with the deepest yearnings or the deepest desires of our being, and getting in touch with them, becoming conscious of them, trying to give expression to them. These things are efficacious. That is, they help bring about and they help realize in our lives what it is we're most deeply yearning for. So I think in essence, I'd want to say that I see the purpose of the book as further giving articulation and expression to some of the deepest yearnings of the human soul today. And by trying to give expression and trying to provide some articulation of what those yearnings are, not only in me, but in you and in so many others, to allow those desires to move up much more into consciousness. And then from that realm of consciousness, they can more readily be applied to action and how we choose to live and how we choose to interrelate. But how it's going to play out, I think, is there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, it's quite interesting when I sometimes speak of the collapse of Christianity as we have known it, and in a nation like Scotland, that collapse is seismic. I mean, one only has to look around in a church, in a typical church on any Sunday, and you ask, well, what's the situation going to be in another 25 years? And the situation looks like it will no longer exist as we've known it. So we're in this time of enormous collapse. And sometimes when I speak about this as being a collapse of religion as we've known it, people will say to me things like, but what will happen to Jesus if the church collapses? And I would say, well, we don't have to worry about Jesus. I mean, Jesus is all about resurrection. Jesus is all about new beginnings that we couldn't have imagined. And I think one of the interesting things for many of us in diaspora or in exile now is that we haven't lost contact with the wisdom of Jesus. If anything, we're more focused on the wisdom of Jesus and his way of love, and his way of love even towards the enemy. So even though we don't know exactly how it's going to play out in terms of the new emerging shape of what Christ-related belief might be for the future, it's okay to be letting go of a lot of what is not working in order to, in a sense, free up the birth canal for something new to emerge.
Yeah, I think so. And to go back for a moment to that idea of the efficacy of desire, that's an interesting thought to me, and someone once told me that the word enthusiasm, the root of the word is entheos, like the God within, and whatever we're enthused by or enthusiastic about, the suggestion was, well, there's a divine purpose to that. So honor that, foster that.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that. And in the Great Search, you talk about something that I want to ask you about, which is I forget which of the teachers now, but there was a concept where it was talking about the ego is meant to serve the center, not be the center.
Yeah.
And the reason that comes up for me now is when I think about the desire that is deep in us and the yearning, or however we might think of it. And then as we go to honor that or follow that, how can we be sure that what we're doing isn't coming from a place of ego, but it is from the soul or from the essence or from that deepest place within us? What's your take on that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really important question, and it's one that I think we constantly need to be alert to, because the ego is quite clever at trying to be the center rather than to serve the true center, the center of the divine at the heart of every human being and every life form. And this is certainly not to put down the ego. The ego is our amazing faculty of consciousness and willpower. So it's a matter of, as someone like Teilhard de Chardin said, it's a matter of de-centering the ego, allowing our consciousness and willpower to truly serve the divine at the heart of our being and at the heart of one another. And my own sort of belief on this, and the practice that I'm committed to, is to surround myself with people who love me enough to challenge me, and to say, well, that is what what you're saying is sounding pretty convenient, John Philip. So I think that this is one of the disciplines or practices that's so important. I mean, very early in the Celtic Christian tradition, there was a spiritual practice related to the anam cara, having a soul friend, having a lover of the soul, and the practice was to show to one's anam cara, to show to one's lover of the soul everything that was emerging, and I think the role of the anam cara is to listen to, my anam cara is there to listen to what is trying to emerge from within the soul and come up into greater consciousness. And I think to ask questions and to be alert to, is this the ego trying to, even through spirituality, trying to sort of claim central place? And so I think the journey of searching, this journey of yearning, this journey of paying attention to the deepest desires of our hearts, this is a journey that has many challenges attached to it, and I think it's really important that we not naively think that every yearning that comes up is going to be sort of free from the way in which the ego can distort and manipulate and try to simply produce what is most convenient to me as an individual, or to us. Think of the ego of our nation, or think of the ego of the human species, which has repeatedly sort of thought just in terms of itself rather than in terms of all life and the wellness of all things. So yeah, let's remain very wise and very alert to the way in which the ego um, can even distort great spiritual vision and end up turning it to serve the self in a limited way.
Yeah, no, that's wise, and I have the sense that something that can assist us in this effort, right? And you focus on teachers who talk about this, of course, is love. And this to me is such an interesting and challenging topic, right? So I want to ask you specifically about some of the words you included from Tagore. Um, and I want to preface this by saying, there are certain things in life that it's easy to talk about, right? Like, and there are things that are easy to tell others how to do or even tell ourselves how to do. And the two examples that come to mind for me often are, well, here's how to have a successful business. You just have more revenue than expense, right? Or you win a baseball game because you score more runs than the other team. Well, that's easy, right? And so it's like, oh, well, the way to navigate this ego thing is with one strategy could be love, or just love can connect us with the divine or whatever. And the thing with Tagore's words that I thought were beautiful, it's a beautiful description, is the widening of love.
Yeah.
The realizing of the divine in every human being and every creature. And also in your book, you write, the greatest liberator of the self is love. For when we truly love another, we find our soul in the highest sense, quoting Tagore. But as a practical matter, how can we be more loving? How can we be love? How can we do that and be that?
Mm. Yeah, I think uh, Tagore has such wisdom for us on this front, because when he says that everyone needs to be twice born, and by that he's meaning, when in our sort of journey in relation to our nation, for instance, I mean, he's particularly alert to the way in which the ego of the nation can become very swollen. And we think in terms just of what is good and secure and safe and prosperous for our nation. And given our sort of growing consciousness of the interrelatedness of all things, I think one of the things we're now being invited to see more clearly is that the part cannot be well if the whole is unwell. So our nation cannot be well, even though we may think we can be well by dominating other nations or by exploiting other nations. So Tagore says that we're born, first of all, into a particular people, into a particular nation, into a particular religion. But we need to be twice born, he says. We need to sort of enable that movement from being simply part of a nation to what he calls a world worker, or a lover of the world and not just a lover of our own nation. And the role of love in that, this sort of deepest energy. Someone like Teilhard de Chardin very prophetically said, after humanity has harnessed all of the energies of earth, sea, and sky, we will finally realize that our greatest energy is love. And on that day, we will have discovered fire for the second time. So this energy for love, in which in a true relationship of love, we find ourselves wanting to give ourselves, um, and it is in the giving, and it is to the extent that we give ourselves that, of course, we are blessed in relationship. That we, um, I mean, we can't even use the word love about a relationship, I think, in which we're not giving ourselves, but we know in experience that to the extent that we give ourselves in love is the extent to which we are most deeply and truly blessed. And Tagore applies that, not only at the national level, individual level, but the national level and the species level as well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful description, and I'm thinking that each of us, or at least speaking for me and kind of projecting more broadly, I suppose that each of us has to learn what that looks like in our own lives, in our own way, right?
Yeah.
Because we can have the concept, but then what that looks like when I wake up and what my particular circumstances are, and whether I'm raising kids or I didn't have kids, or whether they're already gone, and what my work is, and
Yeah.
all this. And two, again, if I can make this personal for a moment, I think of two examples. The first one is there were many years where I would organize a 50-mile walk. So in one day, 20 hours, the goal was to do 50 miles in 20 hours. And the first time I did it was such an incredible challenge that I wanted to organize it for others.
Yeah.
And so as I did, and I would walk it as well, I would see it invariably there were people who wouldn't finish. It's just such a arduous
Yeah.
undertaking and so painful. But I would want everyone to finish who could finish. So I would find that I would fall back to support and encourage people. But then it was the challenge for me personally was knowing when there were people who just weren't going to make it. And if I stayed with them to try to support and encourage them, I myself wouldn't make it.
Right.
So there was always this challenging moment for me of going, do I think they have what it takes to get through what they started? Or should I go forward to myself finish and help everyone I can who's ahead of me? And like this thing of walking past people who are homeless. Many people have had this experience where you walk by someone when you're with your kids and they're so touched. They're like, we should do something, or what's wrong?
Yeah.
But to me, I'm so calloused that it's like, oh, and I tell myself these stories. Well, the system's broken, and if I give them money, they're just going to use it, for alcohol or whatever. And so that decision of when do I do what's in my interest versus trying to help someone else that maybe can't really help. I don't know that I'm making a good point here, but the overarching thing where I started was when it comes to loving others, how can we know how to do that without it coming at a cost, at too high of a cost to ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. An important question. Brilliant. Can we pause the recording for a minute? I just need to go to the next room.
Yeah, I'll hit resume. Okay, cool. So I think just the last thing, and if there's anything residual from that thread of conversation, of course, you're welcome to speak to that. But one thing I want to be sure to ask you also, while we're on the topic of love, I thought this was so beautiful. In the conclusion, you write that love has two distinct impressions. One is a deep yes, and the other is an emphatic no. Will you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think on the love front, Jesus's wisdom here is really important to me, as a Christian and as someone trying to pay attention to the true nature of relationship, and that is love your neighbor as you love yourself. So that it's really important to get that one right. It's not about loving the neighbor at the expense of loving yourself. It's a matter of repeatedly paying attention to what does it mean to truly reverence and to truly cherish the depths of the divine in oneself? And so I think the love of the other, the love of the neighbor, the love of the enemy, um, can only be sort of held in in a true sense of balance and integration if one is repeatedly focusing also on how to truly love myself. Um, and and I think that we can grow in wisdom on this front, and again, not just individually, but in community and with people who are prepared through love to truly challenge how we're living, how we're seeing ourselves in relation to our neighbor, or seeing ourselves in relation to other life forms, or seeing our nation in relation to other nations, and seeing ourselves in relation to our enemy as well, so that the rooting of that practice of love in terms of a self-respect and a self-reverence is really important. And where I go in the conclusion of the book in terms of speaking both the yes and the no of love, I think that it was Mahatma Gandhi, I think, who said that one of the most powerful words in the English language is the word no. No, I will not be part of a disrespect for other castes, other religions, and no, I will not tolerate my nation being dominated by the British Empire. No, no, no. And then he goes on to say, and an even more powerful word is the word yes, saying yes to the true essence of the other, yes to the divine at the heart of all life. So I think the way of love is repeatedly inviting us to live in that dynamic of why are we to sort of passionately say no to the abuse of earth? Why are we to passionately say no to the way in which women have been subordinated and abused in so much of our Western culture and religion and society? And it's because that no needs to be rooted in a deep yes to the essential sacredness of earth, to the essential sacredness of the feminine, to the essential sacredness of the powerless who are sort of dominated and abused. So it's not enough, I believe, to just say the yes. I think if we're truly saying yes to the sacredness of one another and earth, then we're drawn into some pretty passionate and prophetic no's to how we're living and how we're relating and how we're sort of often wronging the powerless.
Yeah, I think that's a very profound concept. What you've just articulated, and all of, a no being rooted in a yes, being in service to love. I mean, it's really a beautiful and nuanced possibility for us, again, to decide what that means for us and what we'll do about it. But even thinking of it in those terms is it's pretty interesting, and it's challenging. It's challenging me, which is good. So thank you. My friends, thank you so much for joining this conversation with me and John Philip Newell. I hope you took away something that you will use to improve the quality of your life and the lives of those around you. Be sure to visit earthandsoul.org, John Philip Newell's website, where you can learn more about his work, about the books he's written, about the events he hosts, the retreats that he's conducting, and even the pilgrimages he leads. Take care.